Business enterprise is the term used by both the federal and New York WARN Acts. If you're in another state and looking at their state WARN laws, they might use other terms. But as those terms have been interpreted, they include generally private employers, and we'll get to the size in a minute. Not all private employers, but sufficiently large ones. And then under the federal WARN law, it is possible that some public entities, meaning agencies or authorities of some kind of government affiliation or ownership, could possibly be covered by the WARN law. In New York, there's a pretty specific carve out. So under the New York law, there would be no coverage of any public entities. And even under federal law, if you're talking about a pretty traditional public entity, such as a city or town, county, or something like that, state, then there would be no likely coverage under these laws. It would have to be some sort of special standalone organization that is nonetheless perhaps government funded or controlled, but doesn't actually perform basic governmental functions like cities, towns, villages, counties, states, etc. do. Okay, so how big do you have to be subject to the WARN laws in the first place? Under the federal law, which again has been in effect for about 30 years, a company would have to have at least 100 employees in the United States. The New York law for the last 10 years has applied to companies with as few as 50 employees in New York. If you are a New York employer but also have employees in other states, for purposes of the New York WARN law, you would focus just on the New York employees. Might be some complexity as to which employee counts the New York employee or which doesn't, and we might address that in a sense later. But that's sort of the broad parameters. Now, before I go on, just keep in mind that whenever I'm talking about the New York WARN law applying, that doesn't automatically mean that the federal law doesn't also separately apply. If you have 100 or more employees and 50 or more employees in New York State, and you're otherwise doing things that would come into coverage under the law, then your obligation could be to comply with both laws separately. But fortunately, the laws are very similar in what they require, or at least the New York law, if you're complying with that, with the lower threshold, and also needing to comply with the federal law, there's not that much more you would need to do to comply with the federal law.